What's up, everybody? Make some noise really quick.
Yay.
Welcome back. I'm so excited to be in conversation with Ophira Eisenberg. Let's let her hear it one more time. So I'm not going to read the bio, but I wanted to give some highlights of the bio. I always get mad when people read the bio, but here we go. Some highlights of this woman sitting next to me. She's the host of Parenting is a Joke podcast with iHeart Radio. Yeah, you can clap. She has hosted NPR's Ask Me Another for 9 years. She's been on the CBS Late Late Show, Comedy Central, HBO, the New York Comedy Festival. She's written a memoir, Screw Everyone, Sleeping My Way to Monogamy, on sale today. We're going to talk about that book. Someone say nice. Hell yeah. All right. Her comedy special, Plant-Based Jokes, is streaming on YouTube. It's hilarious. You guys should check it out. She's a mom. She's a comedian. She's a wife. She's on tour and recently won a Webby. What's up with that? For Best Podcast Host. And also, she's on Moon Tower Just for Last Comedy Festival, just to name a few things. Guys, let her hear it. That's amazing. So many cool things.
Thanks, Tori. It always makes you feel so good when someone reads that and you're like, oh, wow, because I don't feel so good.
I'm always like, don't read it. Ew.
Right. No, that was great.
So one of the reasons I enjoy you as a stand-up is because you do this thing that I sort of do, as you talk from an biographical standpoint, like giving your life experience and all that good stuff. And there's some storytelling in there. And so I wanted you just to talk about a little bit of what it's like writing from your life.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think it took me a long time to even do that. It's where I wanted to write from. But, you know, it is, you gotta be kind of courageous. And I think when I first started doing stand-up, I didn't write the truth. I wrote what I thought would be funny. And actually it was the storytelling, started to get into storytelling, which really, if you're doing autobiographical storytelling, kind of demands the truth because it's a different leg. It's the vulnerability in the story that really connects people. And so once I started leaning into that, I was like, oh, the truth is always going to be better. It really is. And that's when you start to find that people relate. Because when I was just writing it for the laughs, sometimes they would laugh and sometimes they wouldn't.
They were worried you weren't genuine. Like they were like you were disingenuous a little bit.
Disingenuous.
Right? Yeah.
And there is something really powerful. Like if I talk about what's true with me and the audience doesn't laugh, I'm like, whatever, still true.
I don't need you. You mentioned storytelling. Obviously, you've hosted The Moth a few times. You guys know The Moth or what? Okay. All right, settle down. You guys know Worth Repeating? Okay.
All right.
This isn't a competition. But one certainly informed the other. If you guys know the story behind Worth Repeating, Paul Flav, who started it, he was inspired by The Moth. And one person didn't know. But yeah, that's what I think is so fascinating. You mentioned vulnerability and the importance of it with storytelling. Can you talk a little bit about what makes that special when you're writing stories like long form? Yeah,
I mean, I think the first stories I did with The Moth, if you were to hear them, which you can, are sad. They're sad from tragic things that have happened to me in my life. Those were the stories that we decided to focus on. Those are the stories that I wanted to get out there. And again, what I found with telling those stories, I tell them in a somewhat humorous way. But the whole thing with telling a story, which is why I love them when I hear them too, is that it doesn't matter if you have gone through that thing. What matters is that everyone has felt sorrow, defeat, love, joy, betrayal. And once you hook in with that through the vulnerability of telling the truth, then you feel this thing with the audience because the audience roots for you. Stand-up, I will say the audience does not root for you. That is not the relationship you have with your audience, but that's what it is in storytelling. But you have to have that emotional connection. Without it, they don't know, like people don't know what we're to hang on to. Yeah.
I did this panel recently, and a therapist came up to me afterwards, and she was like, "You know what you're talking about there, that connection?" And I was like, "Why are you talking to me like this?" And she had like one eye, and I'm like, "What is happening?" And she said it's like in group therapy, transference happens when you're that vulnerable, and that people can feel that emotion, and that's what makes it super special. Would you agree? Or
yes, absolutely. And it will be interesting after telling a story. I survived a terrible car accident as a child, for example. And I have a whole story about that. But the things that people would come up to me and talk to me about afterwards were these little smaller moments in the story that they hooked onto and clearly experienced. And that was the stuff that maybe I wanted to cut out at one point, because I was like, I feel like I don't, there's always this thing, you're like, you want to look good in your story. Like you want to be a better version of you maybe than you were in reality. But if you can let yourself be not that, let yourself be the messy human that you were, that's when everyone goes, that's what it is, that's what humanity is, that's what living on this planet is.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. So you host the Moth and you do stand-up. How is hosting the Moth different from stand-up? We talked about how like the audience is more like open and receptive and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about like the difference in hosting, say, like a stand-up show versus like the Moth for the audience that may not know?
Right. I mean, I think you're still like, as a host, your job, as you hosted tonight, is like, hey, welcome to my party. Everything's gonna be okay. You're in safe hands, that kind of thing, and it's really opening it up. I would just say, like in stand-up, of course, in stand-up, especially if I'm in a comedy club, not a theater setting, but a comedy club. You can be brutal with people, and they want it. They're, the amount of times I don't
like, hurt me.
Yeah, they'll come up to, they're like, oh, make sure you make fun of my brother. You're like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? There's like a sort of thirst for blood. There really is a thirst for blood. And in the storytelling world, it's a totally different relationship. People, I think I feel like it's just more of it's closer to theater in that way, where it's like, oh, I want to be taken somewhere. I want to go on a journey with you somewhere. I don't think anyone walks into a stand-up club going like, we're going on a journey. Right. They're like, make fun of my boss.
Call me white. I get that a lot. I'm like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so...
But I like it. Don't get me wrong. I love it.
I love it. Everyone, I like it because I feel like sometimes the stories can be heavy, and I feel like my job is just to break tension the whole time.
That is so fun.
It's like, let me address the awkward, and then everybody's like, oh, she said that. And then some of them will giggle, and the rest are like, well, she's canceled.
But yeah, I think a lot of just humor in general is based on tension, right? Yes. And just how you use that tension, and that's what timing is all about, like how you're using tension. And the fun thing with stand-up, there's an efficiency of words, which is storytelling could be efficiency of words too. I don't write with an efficiency of words thought when I'm doing storytelling, but comedy, it is like when you can get something down to
a science,
100 words or something like that.
I used to have a mentor that I always be like, trim the fat. And I'm like, are you calling me fat? Like, I don't know. I would get so defensive, but it would be like, you're saying too many words to get to the point. And so I had to sort of like reverse train, I've noticed, like where I was stripping everything away. And then now I'm like, oh no, but storytelling is fun. Like more words are fun. Sometimes it shows that you're getting somewhere, right?
Description, like you can do more describing in storytelling. Yeah. Which reminded me, I did this act tonight, and I keep wanting to put this one. I talked about my therapist. There's this one descriptor I wanted to put about my therapist, and I missed it, everybody. But I feel like it would just give so much more. You would know this person. She always showed up for our appointments with wet hair.
Ew. I don't like it when they look great. I'm like, wash your hair, dry it.
Yeah.
You can't put the windows down the way
in. Maybe you need an executive function coach. Maybe I don't need one. Maybe you need one.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I think it's cool that you're in therapy.
Thanks.
I myself am fine. Nothing is wrong with me. No, that's great. Sliding scales are fun.
I'm always negotiating with my
Like, what can I get for $20? They're like, that's not this office. It's a good time to talk about what seemed to work. And I don't know if this is your intention. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I was listening to some of the episodes on your podcast in preparation for this because I wanted to, just take you in. So for those of you that don't know, Parenting is a Joke is a podcast on iHeart. And it's pretty cool. Can you explain... Firstly, I want you to introduce it. Can you explain the format of it for those that may not know the podcast?
So basically, as I kind of joked about, is that I work a unusual hour job, and I also work. And it occurred to me when I had a child, all these different things that I could not find myself reflected in books or even a lot of people around me. I was like, where are not even just mothers, but just parents in general with odd hours, because you read any book that you go, oh, I want me time. They're like, okay, get up 1 hour before your family. I'm like, okay, so I get home from the club at 1 and then I should get up at 5? Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. So I thought there's got to be I work in stand-up, but what about people who work in healthcare? What about people who work in all kinds of services that are at night? How are those people parenting? So I talk to other stand-up comedians primarily because they are funny and they are great interviews about what it's like to have a creative career with odd hours, to still have a dream and want to do it even when you have little kids, because there's also this idea, mostly for mothers, that you don't do anything until the kids leave the house.
Yeah.
And then you can, and if I do that, wait till then, I'm dead. So gotta go. And what it's like to do all of these things in this current world. Mm-hmm. And we have great, and I also just, I will say one of the things I found from talking to people is I had a child by getting pregnant, like the old-fashioned way, I guess. But that is a rare story. And I feel like that is so underrepresented in when we talk about families.
Yeah. No, I think so. That's a great point. I got to listen to a few episodes, so I got to listen to Tig Notaro, Harry Kondabolu, who I opened for a couple times.
Nice.
Kristen Shaw.
Yes.
Janine Gaffigan, Eric from, from that show where they're all rich, Bogo Cyan, Joe List and Sarah. You've interviewed all these comics. There's always this moment when the episode starts where Ophira will say, "What the fuck?" And I started thinking about that because motherhood can be very isolating.
Yeah.
Like I found when I had my son, I was very young. I wish I would have waited because he's an asshole, but he could have waited. But I always found motherhood to be isolating, and I always found other mothers to be the opposite of me. So I didn't really hang out with them, which made it more isolating,
I was talking about this actually in an episode. It was one of the most amounts of feedback I got about basically trying to make mom friends, and I just bomb on the playground all the time. I'm just bombing, and then I get nervous and I start saying stupid stuff. I was with the moms, and I'm like trying to, ingratiate myself, and they're like, "Oh, there they are, another school day," and I was like, "Yeah, can't take them with you, can't stuff them in a bag." Like, I don't know why I said that. And then they all looked at me, and then I was like, but it would probably be one of those like Flock and Kirkin bags or whatever. And then the woman corrected me, and I was like, ah. And then they had a moment, and then they left, and I was like, oh my God, what happened?
It's bad. It's mothers are mean. They're like mean girls. They're just like, oh, you don't love your kid with every breath in your body, and it's like, bitch, what are you talking about?
Can I tell you one dirty one?
Yes, please.
So I thought we were just getting real, like talking real with a bunch of moms, and they were talking about sex after having kids, and I said, I just said, well, who wants to give a blowjob anyways? And this one woman put up her hand, so I high-fived it, and she was like, no, I meant me. I like giving a blow.
You thought you were bonding. And she was like, I'm volunteering as tribute.
It's like, what is wrong with you people? Or me. Anyways, I was telling this, and I just found so many people got in contact with me saying, this is how I feel. I felt like that. And I was like, all these cool people are out there feeling lonely and isolated.
Yeah. Oh, no, really. I was listening to it and I was laughing. And, you know, some of the insights are, I think I was listening to the episode with Kristen Shaw, and you guys talk about, you know, the difference between males that have kids, you know, that are husbands and things like that. Whereas, you know, you're at the club and you're hanging out with fathers and stuff like that, right? It's late and they're out and there's no question about it. Whereas if it's you, the first thing is like, where's your kid, right? When I had a baby and like starting stand-up, everybody was always like, where is he? And I'm like, dude, he's in the car. Like, when you... Can one of you check on him? Like... And it would be like a huge deal. And hearing you talk about that question... Like, nobody walks up to a man and is like, where's your kid?
No.
You know? Can you just talk a little bit about, like, I guess the difference? Like, Kristen said it perfectly. She was saying that you were saying you hung out with the fathers, and then she was like, dude, I have been with someone, like, on set, and they're like, oh, my wife just had a baby. And then they were back to work the next day. So you just talk a little bit about that difference?
I joked that someone could be on stage saying I had a child one day ago like a man, and everyone will applaud. I was in no shape to be on stage one day after I had a child. Or maybe even 3 months afterwards. I was on stage, but I had no business. Someone should have just put a nice shawl around me and taken me off. But no one, I didn't even know all the guys I performed with for years when I was without a family were fathers. Yeah. Because we'd hang out, we'd go for drinks after our sets, we'd socialize. And then I had a kid and they were like, oh yeah, I have a 15-year-old. I was like, what, you all have children? Who
let you have children?
It never occurred to me. And, you know, and part of me just goes, hey, listen, you have your setup how you have your setup.
Yeah.
And they're out there making money. Of course, there's a social aspect because they were hanging out afterwards, but they're making money. Like, they're not doing free shows, exactly. So it's different. Yeah. So there's that aspect, but it is just so wild because I did this tour and it was 6 weeks, and that was the first time I'd been away for that long, and I just was flooded with so much feedback as to the quality of me as a parent by doing this tour. And I was like, the other two guys on the tour, parents? No, they're fine. All right, cool.
Yeah.
You know, I'll say a lot of comics recently in my world have had kids, like just had them. And there's more and more women, and they are scrambling. And a few times now, they are bringing the baby to the club, and someone is holding the baby while they are on stage.
I love that.
Me too. I'm like, you know what? Why don't we normalize this?
Yeah, it's not that bad. You know,
we need a better green room, but you know.
Yeah, maybe a sink in here.
Oh, I'm
just imagining me like pumping because I breastfed for like 8 years, but just like imagine him on stage like, Mom, I fell. Yeah.
By the way, this T-shirt that I made called Low Supply is based on my breastfeeding journey.
Hell yeah.
I walked around topless for 6 months.
I love that.
But you think my husband would love that, but I was crying the whole time, going, I can't do this. It was the saddest strip club. So we called our sad topless strip club of our house Low Supply.
Nice. Somehow sexy a little bit. I know you guys like that back then. I don't want to get too ahead of myself because I talked about, I read the book. I love the book, by the way. You talk about in the podcast, the last thing I want to ask about the podcast, how motherhood wasn't always for you, and actually something sparked it. There was like a panic, a medical thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Medical thing?
Yeah.
I could do a solo show called Blood. This is not about blood. I did. I was not going to have kids. Matter of fact, I said very strongly on stage, off stage, I'm not having kids. My mother said to me, never have children. They will ruin your life. She actually said never get married and never have children. They will ruin your life. Which yeah, because which is always great to hear from your mom. Thanks, Mom. Happy Mother's Day. So I did have it in my mind that I was like, no, and for all kinds of reasons, and then time was just moving forward. So I was like, well, I'm also just putting myself in a situation where I'm not going to have a child, and then I had a breast cancer diagnosis, and then surgery and treatment, and that took a long time. And when I came out of that, I would just say I was a little bit more open to different possibilities. Yeah. And I got pregnant from my husband, which was shocking after being married so long. And honestly, that was so shocking to me because I thought my body had betrayed me. So I was just really surprised my body could do anything positive. That pregnancy did not last. It was a miscarriage. I had a miscarriage, and not only was it a miscarriage, but it was it has nothing to do with anything. You love it when doctors say like, we don't know. It's just one of those things. Bad luck. You're like, what? It was called very rare. Maybe someone will feel seen or heard by this. It was called a partial molar pregnancy. So it never was going to become a fetus. It was a grouping of cells, and so that did not turn out to be a fetus. But that also caused a grouping of cells that are irregular. Is basically the definition of cancer. So once I had to be put in a situation where I had to give blood every week for 6 months to make sure that no irregular cells were growing in me, which was one of the darkest periods of my life. Even though you'd think, how could it be dark after the other thing? Weird, right? And after that, I really thought, that's it. I'm never doing this again. Yeah. I am never doing this again. But then I really thought, if I don't try because I'm afraid, then I'll have to live with that. If I try and it doesn't work out, I can live with that. But if I just do it because I was too afraid to see what would happen, I don't think I could live with that. So,
yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Such a big thing. And what I liked, last thing I'm going to say about the podcast, what I liked was so many of the stories of, that come to life about in vitro, about how hard it is to conceive and all that. And you're talking to these people that are comedians that are sort of like, they're supposed to make light of situations, but you're still very much seeing that this shit's hard. Like having a kid is hard. And then you talk a little bit about the guilt of like, well, I got pregnant, and things like that.
Yeah.
And I love that you're sort of shedding light on that it's a big deal,
Yeah, and just the lengths and amount of money.
Yeah.
People are
so much money.
What they have a plan and they want to do it.
I think with Sarah, the thing that stood out was that she said that it was like 60,000 or something to try with her own egg, and then there was only a certain percentage. It was like it's a terrible percentage, and then. But to use someone else's egg, it was like 60%. And then she was like, yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, right.
And a third of the cost. And I had never known that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I feel bad for being a breeder. Like, honestly, the Latina in me was like, ew. Yeah, you also went through losing your mom. That was a big thing. And you're the baby. I'm the baby.
Yeah.
I also lost my mother. I love when you talk about her because she sounds like a hard ass. You talk about her in the book a lot. I think that my favorite part listening to your podcast was you did this intro, and it was around Mother's Day. And, you were tired of getting solicited about what to do for your mother. And so rather than just kind of take it, you wrote a bunch of letters to all the people trying to sell shit to you.
Yeah.
Did that really happen?
Yeah, I wrote an email to Crate and Barrel being like, hey, I don't need to buy my mother. I mean, there were dark people. Yeah. I was like, I don't need to buy my mother new bedroom furniture because unless you're talking about a deathbed. Yeah. Because I was just, I really leaned into it because there's no way. We all probably get emails for things that are just completely inappropriate. I mean, and you unsubscribe for the rest of your life. You can't get off these lists. And sometimes you just don't need that reminder. Yeah. And so it was just my way of like trying to turn it back on. No one ever got back to me.
Yeah. Oh, good. Good. I think the flight one cracked me up. You were like, she's at her final destination. And I was like, aw, same. Where can people find your podcast if they're looking for it?
Oh, as we say, it's an iHeart podcast, but you can get it on any platform that you like to listen to podcasts.
Awesome. I hope some of you subscribe, and follow. It's good. It's good. It's entertaining. Even you dads, you'll enjoy it. There's some great stuff.
I even have a bunch of people that are non-parents because they just like hearing the, comedic conversations. Yeah.
It's great. I really want to talk about your book. For those of you that don't know, it's a memoir. I think it just celebrated 11 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's called Screw Everyone, Sleeping My Way to Monogamy. It was a delicious read. I loved it. It was so good.
It's fast. It's a fast read, people. Small words.
I tore through it. And I was listening to the audiobook at one point, too, and my son was like, what the fuck are you listening to? It was the Garfield part. Yeah. I want to read a little thing about it, just a little tiny thing, because I loved it. In the introduction, you're sort of explaining the book, and there's this little paragraph that I liked. Call me an enthusiastic consenter or a fairly responsible hedonist, but sleeping around was often the byproduct of getting what I wanted. I felt empowered going against the accepted rules of society by intentionally going home with a guy. They weren't just random guys, I picked them. That being said, I was an advocate for equal opportunity hookups with everyone from jazz musicians to blind albinos. Isn't that great? And it really sets the tone for what it is. You have these non-conventional ideas about sex and love, from like getting over, sleeping, like sex for the first time, losing your virginity and all that good stuff. And I really I identified with like this, being Latina is like, it's so coveted, right? Sex is like, that's for your husband, and like you will use it to breed, and we don't enjoy it, and Catholicism won't let you, and all these ideas. Can you talk a little bit about that non-conventional idea, and then we'll go to an audience question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I talk about my mother being very old-fashioned, but I will say that we never really talked about sex, but she was very clear. My father died when I was 13, and she did date after that, and we didn't become buddies or anything talking about sex, but she was very clear that she thought that relationships were fun, and that you could be smart about it, and that maybe you don't have to find the right person. You can have the right person for now, and you can enjoy it. And she really did set me up for this, you can be empowered. You just have to be smart about it. You can do this with intelligence. You don't feel bad about it, and that it can be a good time. And you know what? I really liked the company of men. There were some women about being in relationships, and I had fun. And in a way, it was how I learned what I liked a little bit. And I was just, I will say that I always get questions about if I should feel shame about it. And it wasn't that I didn't start that super young, and I did have quite a few partners, not the kind that makes world records or anything, just, a bunch, maybe 40, I don't know. And I don't remember, because guess what? I didn't keep track, okay? I'm not a guy. I don't do that. And there were failures along the way. And there were times I got hurt and I got my heart broken, or it was a little stupid on my part, but I wouldn't take away any of them. Yeah. I wish a couple of times I was a little bit more resilient because I think I held torches for dumb people.
My favorite thing.
But I really did choose them. Like
Yeah.
I never did not make that choice.
I love that.
Hi, I was just gonna ask, I guess it's for both of y'all, what would you say to someone who's wanting to start stand-up but very socially anxious?
Oh,
And-
yeah.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, what would, I know that's like very broad.
Yeah,
but
no, that's
yeah.
okay. I would say, I mean, so if very like special K, a little bit.
Ketamine.
Someone
no.
says just like detach yourself from reality, baby, and you'll get up there. I mean, I would say if you feel really anxious about it, a workshop or a class scenario is probably your best bet because then it just gives you that little bit of legs on the ground to do it in a safe environment. I mean, you have to write something, so that will persuade you to write something as well and try it in a small group setting. I feel like that's like the easiest path of least resistance to go. If there's a place that has a really warm, supportive open mic, you can go do that. But that's trial by fire. That sounds to me like not what you want.
Friend of mine, no, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. Maybe, I've tried both a little.
Yeah.
I was just,
I think going to open mics, I had a lot. Sometimes I still get very nervous, but I think it's, people are like, picture the crowd in your underwear, but I think that's distracting. Because I'm like, am I attracted to this person? But I think the best thing for me is just like my first 2 years, I was on stage 5 or 6 times a week, and it's like reps, and it's a lot of people don't talk about it. It's the writing process. It's like it's going on stage, writing something with intention, and then I record myself and I listen back to where people are laughing, and then I know that I need to edit that down and then do it again. And a lot of it is just being familiar on stage, like knowing how to hold a mic, and that even alleviates the anxiety, right? Like taking the mic in your hand and knowing you can rest it on your chin if your hands are shaking, which is what I do. Like, this is why it's here. I still get nervous, but it's just repetition. And Tuesday nights at Laugh Out Loud Comedy Club.
Ah, there you go.
It's the best mic. And also, my buddy Noah's here, and they have a good open mic on Thursdays at Tandem. Super supportive audience, too. And there are Facebook groups for stand-up, too.
thank you both.
Yeah.
There's a part in your memoir where the book itself is just like talking about figuring it out, right? Figuring out what you like in the bedroom and figuring out what you want in life, and a lot of like traveling. I love how you would fall for people, and then you did this thing in the book where you'd make little like deals with yourself, like if they liked you, like I think one of them was like if someone comes on the subway, like, and they happen to sit here, it's like little deals,
yeah.
like the little promises. And I'd never heard anybody else do that because I totally do that shit. Like making little deals with yourself, like, oh, it's kind of like playing He Loves Me Not, but with like moments
With
in
moments
life.
in life.
Do you still do that?
No, but I will. I do it with. I don't do it with love. I
Yeah,
guess.
obviously, you
but
got
I
that one.
sometimes. Is it called magical thinking? Is that what it's called?
Manifesting, right?
Manifesting. Yeah, I do a little bit of. I'll do a little bit of like, or if I'm stuck in a decision, I'm like, okay, I don't know which way I should go. Okay, so that if the next person wearing a red shirt is a man, and then I go this way. Like I'll just do
Yeah.
these dumb things.
I love it.
And then that happens, and I go, I'm not doing that.
Like, actually, tummy full.
Yeah.
I got a comment and a question.
Sure.
First, the comment is, you have the most wonderful job in the world.
Oh.
The thing is that you bring light to people. Somebody's having a crappy day or something, you make them laugh, and that's that means the world to someone. And the question is, what was your path? I mean, how did you eventually become a stand-up? What drove you in that direction?
Yeah, I think, I've thought about this a lot, and I think my answer is childhood trauma.
Seems to be a common.
You talk about that in the book. Like,
But, you know, it's actually, I feel like most people I've talked to now about this feel like if they have a very strong path that they've taken, they're like, it's because of trauma. Like, it is a
Seems to be
response
a common
to trauma.
thing with comics. I mean,
It is a common thing
well,
with
it
comics.
happened to us.
Yeah. But I do think there's a little bit, I think maybe youngest of six is sort of classic in that way. Like, I really did not have a voice in my household, and I really wanted that voice. So there's a little bit of that. My family was very funny in their own kind of sarcastic, way. And then I think it was just the time that I grew up in, where all of a sudden there was an opportunity for me to pursue such a thing.
What was that, like the 70s, 80s?
Well, for me, yeah, I was born.
Curious.
Yeah, I actually wish I would have done stand-up in the 80s, but that was way before my time, because that's when people we hear this, like the golden era, and people just made all this money, and all these greats came out of that era. But I started in just before 2000, and nobody wanted to see stand-up. People hated comedy clubs.
Why was that?
Because of television, I think. Honestly, it's very, and stand-up clubs were like these dark, horrible places. I don't know. It was it was just the way the culture felt about it. We were like, you said to a friend, "Oh, you want to go to stand-up club?" They'd be like, "Ugh, gross." And and so that's when I started. But when I started, there was like an indie scene that was percolating that I found myself in, and it was weird and experimental, and people were doing all kinds of wild stuff. So that's where
You were working at a Kinko's,
at
right?
Kinko's, yes.
Yeah. In your book, you talk about thanks, Angel. Get cute. I'm gonna put you in my trunk. You say, there's a correlation between me and sex and me and stand-up. There's the obvious therapy angle, the bottomless well of self-loathing that no amount of adoration by strangers will ever fill, blah, blah, blah. Boring. The more visceral link between the two has to do with the deep connection you create with a person when you have sex, and with a crowd when you get a laugh. Even if you can bond for a brief second, it's a moment of bliss, a wave of pure release. Good sex, that is. I would say I would seriously rather do the worst stand-up show than have bad sex any day.
True.
Applause break? Okay. No, I think that's a really interesting take on it, because there is that rush. Like, people talk about it a lot, like that connection, right? Where you get the laugh and then you're like, oh, this isn't that bad.
Yeah.
And then, there's sex. Can you talk a little bit more about that connection?
Well, I mean, I will say with the stand-up, that's chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
Because as you go forward with it, it's harder and harder to get that little spark. So then you just keep upping, which is good. You keep upping the bar for what you want in order to feel that bliss or but that connection to the audience, when you can, I mean, that goes a long, long way. And because I'm married now for 16 years, I can't talk about sex.
Yeah. I knew you were in love with Jonathan. I knew it was going to be Jonathan when you didn't really talk about the sex with Jonathan. I was like, oh, she likes this one. Speaking of Jonathan, I want to talk about that listicle he made for the comic book. Because he used a very triggering word for me, and I think a lot of female stand-ups.
We'll see.
The word is comedian.
Comedian. Does that
Comedian?
make anyone else skin
Anybody
crawl?
else? Yeah.
With an E and like a French version of a
The
comedian.
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 Oh, chante. Yeah. I've always really hated that word. I've had people bring me up in the worst ways, where it's like, and now a very funny comedian, guys. It's a girl. Give it up for Tori. Blah. Can you talk about why you don't like that word?
Yeah, I don't like it because, I mean, it just the exact same way. It's a very soft word, right? Comedian. So comic obviously has some hard consonants. Even comedian has some hard consonants, but comedian, like, it just sounds exactly what the judgment on what it is like to be a female comic, all wrapped up in that word. It's some like softer, like, oh, everybody, okay, let's have a precious moment because we're bringing up a comedian. Oh, isn't she adorable? Okay, we're going to put her back in her box now. And so, there's a lot of words like that. I think that we are slowly phasing out in general. Even, you wouldn't waiter or waitress. We say server. Like we are getting better at like just looking at these things and not being so completely gendered with our language.
There's no need to gender it.
But that, I feel like comedian isn't even a word that really exists. It was like completely made up. You're not going to find in the dictionary. Completely made up to be clear that
there's a difference between this comedian and a comedian. Yeah, it is very... it
was just another like, you don't belong here.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Good. Okay, cut. Oh, just kidding. I thought this was funny. In the book, you joke about never dating a comedian.
Yes.
There were some exceptions, but sex exceptions, not dating. Can you talk about why you steered clear from comics?
Why? I mean, I like not dating in my profession. That is for sure. I think it's because we're both going for the same thing, so there'd be competition that would be rough. I know there are some very successful comedian couples, and I think that's a pretty interesting path there, just in terms of like who's opening for who? Do you both travel? Are you both headlining? How does that even work? And I never wanted the idea, it's always with comics, it's sort of inside baseball, but with comics, you're always like, who books that room? How do I get on this stage? How do I get on that stage? And I thought the idea of going to sleep beside someone, and right before you close your eyes, someone goes, so who's booking the late show now? It would just be like, oh my God, can I never get away from this?
Yeah, the competition is weird.
The competition.
Yeah, I think so. I did find the part in the book where you have that headliner really funny, the sexual experience. You guys have to read the book. It's not Harlequin romance, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's a summer read.
Summer read.
We're coming to summer.
I get that. I don't date comedians, but I have slept with a few open micers, so they're not real. They won't like that.
That's like dating an admin assistant.
Yeah. I remember one was like, am I the first comedian? I'm like, honey, you're an open micer. Still haven't. The book will be on sale after. I recommend you pick it up. Look at all these notes I wrote. And these are all just about the sex experiences. It's like, gotta try that. Just kidding. Really great. I want to pivot because we have a few more minutes. If anybody has a question, we're going to be wrapping it up. But you hosted NPR's Ask Me Another for 9 years.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
You interviewed and played silly games with celebrities like Sir Patrick Harris, Rosie Perez, Nick Kroll, Chelsea Handler, and more. Who had you starstruck?
A few, I was just thinking about this today because it came up in my field. Lucy Lawless.
Ooh.
Xena.
Yeah.
And she was just such a sweet person, and was so like warm. Not everyone has to be, but backstage super warm and nice and very conversational. And she was with Bruce Campbell, because they were doing Evil Dead television show, and I loved Bruce Campbell. So the combination of those two together, and they were both just hanging out. Just hang out as if we were hanging out friends. And so I was starstruck and also trying to be like, no, I'm cool too. I am hanging. But that was very intense.
That's
I
so
thought.
Cool.
Melissa McCarthy, that was only over Zoom, and she was with Ben Falcone, her husband.
Oh, wow.
But they were that was just so dynamic. They were literally jumping out of the screen with just personality and charisma. And Sarah Paulson.
Oh, I love her.
And, again, no makeup on, just so casual and smart and totally gorgeous and glowing. And again, I know it sounds strange to be like, they were like real people, but they were like real people, and it surprised me, which is why I think I was starstruck.
What's it like working for NPR and trying to provide this comic relief in such a serious environment.
within a news cycle
Yeah.
that's intense. Yeah, I did feel like we were the little gestures at the office while, the reporters are doing God's work. And we're just like, does anyone have a funny pun about fish? So, and then sometimes, because our show existed, produced by NPR, so it did have to hold to the standards of a news organization. There was, all the games got fact checked, but sometimes the jokes got fact checked, and I was like, you can't fact check a joke, like you just can't. They were like, was it really the best day of your life? Like you're like, that's a bad example, but it would be, sometimes they would want to fact check the jokes, and I was like, if you fact check, you can't fact check things that are supposed to be based on hyperbole or like heightened or whatever.
That's so funny.
So, and sometimes we just had to get rid of them because we couldn't
Prove it.
Yeah, we couldn't prove it. So,
I'll go to the audience.
2 quick comments and then a question. You're definitely rocking like Xena Bangs. So
oh yeah,
pretty
thanks.
cool.
Yes.
And the word comedian definitely makes me think of like Carol Burnett, like not.
Oh,
like,
interesting.
But just she
Yeah.
does rock, but like it makes me think of like an old timey
Yes.
time of like when it was like, whoa, wow, Carol Burnett.
Right, like
Yeah,
a comedian would come out of one of
Yeah.
these, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But last time you were here, I do remember you being perplexed by the concept of breakfast tacos. Have you tried to revisit this concept? Are you thinking about it?
You know what? Thank you for bringing that up. I completely forgot about my quizzical relationship with the breakfast taco.
Yeah.
I guess I should deal with that tomorrow, huh?
Per chance.
Sounds like
Per
it.
chance.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, and where am I going?
Original donut is what I was going to say.
Original
too. But
donuts.
Yeah. Original donut, Garcia's. I mean.
So no one has a problem that the place called Original Donuts is for
Their
the
donuts are
breakfast
okay.
taco.
Their donuts are okay.
Okay.
But the tacos.
Yeah, don't get the donut.
Wow.
Lastly, and I guess this was just something that I was thinking about. 9 years is a long time to have the job
Sure.
with NPR. And you mentioned in, I think it was St. Louis on the Air, they were plugging a show. You were headlining in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And they asked you, what you thought about the show ending, and you mentioned that you had very little notice.
That is true.
Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, the shock of it all, or how did that feel to get your job
Relive
taken
that?
away? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have no idea. I had
Yeah.
absolutely no idea. And it was the classic. I don't. If anyone has had this in their life, it's like the same story. If anyone that you've rarely talked to at an organization in a higher up position sends you a text and says, "Hey, can we talk?" And you reply, "About what?" Because you're smart. And they write back, "I'd just like to share some news." And I was like, "Oh, this is it."
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Shit.
so that it was. I did not see it coming at all. I don't. We were all on the entire team. I mean, obviously there were some people on the team that were not shocked because they were making these calls.
Damn.
But yeah, we didn't know. And I mean, I think if it wasn't for the pandemic, it would have kept going. But I mean, for how long? Who knows? What can I
Yeah.
say? But we had to go down to a skeleton team, and we lost 3 of the top people. And then the other person that was on top overseeing all the entertainment shows at NPR left. So all of these people were gone. And to rebuild the show and actually rebuild that department at NPR would be huge wages and a lot of money. And I think they were just like, we can't do that right now.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you're still playing games. You've obviously learned a lot from that time.
Yeah.
And your fan base has seemed to follow you in your transition sounds like to comedy. Sorry, the words. And, you have all this stuff with the Moth, and I'm so glad that you sat down and talked to me. We could keep talking, but I want you guys to have an opportunity to buy some merch from her. I made her bring stuff all the way from New York. So there's books. We got the little...
Oh, yeah, this is a high-end water bottle if you have a child around you in your life. It says future lost and found item. So you can just cut to the chase. and some very soft, high-quality T-shirts that say...
And this wonderful book,
And
which
the
I
book.
can't recommend enough. If also on Audible, if you want to, Ophira does voice it. So if you want to hear her, I was telling her when I was like listening to the book and reading and listening, because I was trying to get it done in a day or two. It took me two. That it was weird talking to her on the phone and then listening to her on Audible talking about a very bad sexual encounter. But I don't know. I loved it. I don't think we have any more questions. This has been Creekside Sessions, Comedy and Conversation with Ophira Eisenberg.